Now, the court case for NLE Choppa is definitely a silent one, but it really shouldn't be due to how serious it actually is. Now let's get straight into why NLE Choppa is looking at prison time. So the day starts in Florida on March 28th. Rapper NLE Choppa, alongside two of his friends named Zyron Matlock and Thony Coleman, were all three arrested for 3 charges. Now these charges are from burglary, carrying a concealed firearm, as well as carrying narcotics. Now these are very concerning charges, but how did this all even happen in the first place? And well, on the night of March 28th, NLE Choppa and his 2 friends, they were on the hunt trying to retrieve a watch that was inside of a vehicle that was just towed a few days prior. Now, knowing NLE Choppa, this was probably some sort of bust down Rolex or something very expensive. So NLE Choppa and his 2 friends, they were wearing dark clothing alongside ski masks and gloves. Not to mention they were carrying firearms and narcotics on them as well, which is just a recipe for disaster. Now NLE Choppa and Matlock, they ended up hopping the fence and they entered the tow yard. Once hopping the fence, they ended up scanning it through, going up and down the aisles of parked cars that were sitting there, and well, sadly they had no luck in finding the car that they were looking for. Now funny enough, the car that they were looking for was actually in a different tow yard that was down the street. But NLE Choppa and Matlock, after realizing that their car was no longer there, they ended up hopping the fence to make a getaway. But in the process of hopping the fence for the second time, they ended up tripping the motion detectors, which immediately calls the police to the location, as it's basically a detection system to make sure that people that break in will end up seeing the cops as soon as they leave. Now NLE Choppa and Matlock, they quickly entered their 2019 Ford Expedition, but the police actually ended up arriving to the scene very fast, as if they were literally just down the street. Once the law enforcement ended up showing up, they ended up conducting a felony traffic stop. While the law enforcement was talking to them, asking why they were here, did they just hop the fence and things in that nature, they ended up asking them to step out of the vehicle. In the process of them stepping out of the vehicle, their firearms were literally sitting right out in the open, as NLE Choppa and his 2 friends were actually sitting on the firearms when they were talking to the law enforcement. That way they were kind of hidden. When exiting the vehicle, the firearms, they could be seen on the top of the back seat, which quickly alerted the law enforcement to arrest NLE Choppa and his 2 friends for carrying firearms and not making it clear to law enforcement that they actually had them on them. A big part of it is letting the law enforcement know, hey, there is a firearm in my vehicle. You're supposed to do that. It's a big part, and NLE Choppa and his boys obviously didn't do so. Now, during the search of the SUV, NLE Choppa had a backpack that was containing substances, which is another charge added to the list. And to make it all worse, it was pretty cleared in the court documents that none of the 3 men actually had a valid concealed carrying firearm permit, or neither of them were even over the age of 21. So them having these items on them is going to be even worse for them in court. Now, after getting put into handcuffs, obviously they were taken into lockup. NLE Choppa, Coleman, and Matlock, they were arrested on scene. They were taken into Broward County, where weirdly enough is actually the same place where YNW Melly is being held. But later that next day, NLE Choppa, he was released on $4,500 bond. Now this is to await the trial of charges of burglary, carrying a concealed firearm, and having narcotics. Now, it has been said that due to them wearing ski masks, dark clothing, and having gloves on, while having the firearms, what was their real motive for that night? As you do not need all of those accessories just to rob a watch from a tow yard, especially the firearms and gloves, as did they not want their fingerprints to be found on a firearm, and why did they even have the firearm in the first place? So currently right now, the law enforcement, they're doing their investigations before the trial starts. They're trying to figure out what was the real motive for this incident, and if somebody who was working at the tow yard that night ended up trying to stop them from breaking into the car, what would have happened with that firearm? Now, law enforcement, they're really just trying to make sure that them wanting to grab the watch out of the car was the only thing that they wanted, and they didn't want anything more than that. But it is weird the fact that they brought firearms trying to retrieve a watch from a glove box inside of a tow yard. So the most realistic outcome for this entire thing is hopefully one of NLE Choppa's boys will take the heat over the narcotics with the backpack. That kind of thing actually happens a lot more than you probably think, so NLE Choppa will probably be looking at the 2 charges of burglary and the firearm. And how the firearm will work, we'll have to see if NLE Choppa's fingerprints are on it, or if he was actually the one sitting on the firearm while inside of the vehicle. And if it comes out to that, NLE Choppa will be looking at 3 to 5 years just for the firearm alone, and that's not including the burglary. The burglary, they could set him up for another couple 3 to 5 years. So from a lot of online sources, it has been said that NLE Choppa, he could be looking at around 3 to 8 years for this, and luckily he doesn't have a crazy, arrest record like NBA Youngboy, but he still does have some issues with the law here and there. I feel like this court case should be definitely talked about a lot more than it truly is. The trial for this actually starts within the next couple of months. No date has been set yet, but I will make sure to keep you updated. I don't know why NLE Choppa felt the need to be even going to this type of a situation. He probably could have worked out a deal with the tow yard to, hey, I'll slip you, a couple grand, you give me the watch that's inside of the glove box, and it's easy as done. For some reason, he wanted to hop a fence and try to grab it for himself, but little does he know, a lot of tow yards and things like that, they'll do anything for a couple of bucks, and if you want to, go to your car and grab something, they'll make sure they look the other way for a couple of dollars. I'm ending the video here. I hope you enjoyed. I'm out. Peace.